Good afternoon, everyone. I think this is a very relevant week to have this conversation because, as some of you may have seen, there's been data out this week that India's unemployment rate is at 6.1%, which is a 45-year high for the country. And as we all know, there are millions of young people joining the workforce every year looking for a job. I'm going to start with Sutapa. Sutapa, if you could set the stage for what is the Indian situation, what is the job scenario, the students who are graduating, how skilled or not are they to be employed?
Megha, I've been thinking about this topic, and I feel that when we talk of the global skill paradox, two things come to my mind. First of all, the position is, and this especially relates to the STEM areas. So there is this huge supply of graduates, of people who are into this area, and there is this huge demand for them, but unfortunately the two are not meeting. So this becomes a paradox because there is need for people with the skill of the STEM areas, and yet they're not able to find the kind of jobs they want to, or the kind of jobs that are existing. And one of the major reasons for this would be the lack of the relevant skills which are required for those jobs. So this would be the global perspective. But then I feel that we, many a times we don't realize how globally connected we are. So the second part is obviously which relates to the Indian situation. We are looking at the demographic dividend in 2025. But are we actually future ready? The kind of education that is the norm over here, be it the primary or the secondary or the higher education, is it going to cater to the kind of jobs that are going to come up, say within 5-10 years? Because this is one area where there's going to be a disruption every 2-3 years. And with the kind of things that are coming in, say, AI or the blockchain or the other things, like, see, initially we were what? We were working on the farms, then we moved on to the industries, and then maybe to the offices, and now it's all cloud. So are we getting our children ready for this? But the kind of education that we are giving, it's very disturbing. Reports keep coming in, like a class 5 child being only able to do the class 2 things, requirements. And I also feel that there is a gender divide onto this. Girls, are we looking at their education enough? Is there the entire cultural approach to bringing up girls? See, there is a culture of silence, there is a culture of victim blaming, so I think it's very difficult to incentivize a parent to send the girl to complete the education. So there are a lot of dropouts. For them, maybe security is a bigger issue. For them, maybe it's more important that the girl stays home and looks after her siblings. So are we getting the girl child into the education flow? And if so, how far are we able to retain them? Because you are also aware the kind of dropout rates we have regarding girls. So my concern was, if we are going to make this country future ready and link it up with the global requirement of skill, then we most certainly need to bring about a lock, stock, barrel change in the kind of environment we are giving to our children today.
I'll come to you on the kind of changes we need to
sure.
make. But Ariadne, can you, since you have now moved to India to address some of these problems, but you have already dealt with these in the Middle East, can you talk about what the situation, since we are also a global world, what the situation is there and what are the kind of challenges you've experienced or seen in your work over there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is a, almost a universal problem. So. And Sutapa, I really appreciate the comments that you made in particular, about women and also about the broken recruitment pipeline that exists. So I'll just start by saying a word about the global skills paradox, which is what we're talking about, and then just something about the kind of the importance of mentorship in addressing the global skills paradox, in particular in this rapidly changing economy. So studies are showing that there are 4 key underlying causes to the global skills paradox. So a shortage of graduates with soft skills, a lack of qualified technicians, a loss of high skills workers, in particular as jobs are changing so dramatically, and then untapped pools of talent. So this was, we saw this clearly in our work in the Middle East and elsewhere. And I would just add that, the question is, are people getting trained, as Sutapa was just saying, for jobs that are being replaced and no longer existing? So where is actually the future of work preparedness? Because, gone are the days of the career counselor who would come to you with a personality test and say, hey, fill this out. Okay, you're going to make a great engineer. Go forth, Now we have to ask questions like, in what role, what kind of company? It's just so much, it needs to be so much more sophisticated and nuanced than that. And so I think that there's actually no replacement for talking to people who are in those companies and in those roles for students to be able to get ready in a world where so much is already automated and becoming even more automated. And I think in order to deal with this paradox, students need to be able to be aware, or young people, job seekers, informed about the range of options that exist before them, so that as sectors begin to cut back, they're able to kind of pivot and adapt easily. And so this is kind of what we're trying to address at Localized. And so I'll just say one more thing quickly, which is I just want to take a step back and kind of ask you to think about when you were first applying to university or for your first job or first internship, who guided you, right? So raise your hand if there was at least one person in your life who served as an early mentor. And it may sound extreme what I'm saying, but actually the statistics are really quite clear about the importance of mentorship, particularly today. So 70% of mentored small businesses survive the first 5 years, and this is more than double than their non-mentored counterparts. 90% of business owners say that having a mentor is an invaluable experience. Startups that are mentored have raised 3.5 times more money than their peers. And of course, we know that there are super high-performing founders and CEO like at Apple and Google who speak openly about the pivotal the pivotal role that mentors played in their own career trajectories. So that was, before mentors would come through our relationships with our family or our community. If you were lucky, you would find someone to help you decide, should you be a doctor, a lawyer, et cetera, what to wear to your first interview or how to deal with stress on the job. But the world has totally evolved now. And so I think it was mentioned in this room yesterday that the statistic from the World Economic Forum that says 65% of young people today are going to be working in jobs that have not been invented yet. So to your question and to what Sutapa was saying a minute ago, schools can't actually prepare students for jobs that don't yet exist, right? But I think what they can do is future-proof them, right? By connecting them to people that are working at the vanguard of the most rapidly changing and evolving industries: AI, robotics, medtech, fintech, edtech, renewable energy, et cetera. So as a use case, Stanford University, which I think has also been mentioned several times here, no longer does conventional career counseling, right? So what they do is they have something called Career Community, and they have 40 full-time employees that are working on this. So basically, no matter what field or job a student chooses to pursue, these people are always finding others, industry experts, to guide them, people with subject matter expertise. So I think the question is, what happens if you don't go to Stanford or you don't have the elite strategic networks to guide you? Most schools don't have the level of resources at their disposal that a Stanford or Harvard does, and they are looking for other strategies to support their kids to go from education to transition to employment. So this is what we're looking at Localized in the Middle East and now in India, where we'll be launching this year. We're focusing on the 100 million students in emerging markets that don't have access to those elite alumni networks, to career insights, to employers, and we're targeting STEM and business-focused schools to help these students access career guidance and industry insights, but from global professionals and top experts with whom they share language and culture and roots, as well as pathways to employers that are hiring talent in these growth markets. So we were born in the Middle East, built in Arabic and English, and are now going to be launching in India this year. So we've built a platform for those without the same privilege, basically, as students, to be able to find those role models.
I'll come back to you on some of the lessons you've picked up in your work in the Middle East. But Jerry, I want if you could shed some light on, since especially with the Polytechnic experience, what are people coming to you for both, and you're the perfect in-between between the supply and the demand. Where do you see the gap? And
well, I think hello, thank you. So I think underlying all of this is the view that talent is the oil of the 21st century. Basically, we're in a race of our brains against robots. And the question is, can we train all people to compete against robots? And I'll use a simple example. If you think of a truck driver in India today, and he gets, or she gets displaced by a autonomous truck that delivers the goods, do you believe that you have an education package sufficient to let that truck driver perhaps sit in this conference and debate the issues that we're debating? And I would say historically, we've taken the view that a good 50% of all of society is not capable of that kind of education. We've written them off and said you can be a service worker, you can be a truck driver, you can be a mechanic, but you cannot be a college graduate. We're facing a problem. The paradox is that everyone needs to be able to be a college graduate to compete against a robot. And currently, we don't believe that's true. So you'll have to do some deep thinking about whether all humankind can be educated to be part of this new society we're creating. That's the deepest problem we face. And politically, it is going to be revolutionary. If you think about the promise of Asia, Japan, 1945, coming out of the war, Japan's rise to third largest economy. South Korea, 1960, South Korea, Malaysia, India, same level of income. Today, dramatically different. So that promise of growth has been India's future, that you too will be able to be South Korea, Malaysia, Singapore. But a surprise, and it's a dramatic and dark surprise, is machines are not going to let you have that future. Cheap labor is no longer the competitive commodity it was, and it'll be even less so in the future. Because, let's take an easy example. There's an American company that originally produced goods in India. It used 300 people to produce those goods. It decided to move back to America. It now produces the same number of goods, 8 employees. So 300 jobs lost in India and only 8 created in America. That future makes India's problems enormously tough. So I think it leads to the second thing, which is giving skills to young people so they can compete against robots is going to be super critical. Now back to my university. So 2 things happened. One is we said clearly you've got to move from the more mechanical world of the 20th century to the more digital world of the 21st century. So we created a game center in which we took 4 schools, business, psychology, design, and engineering, put them all in one center and said, you'll invent electronic games. Because that's a huge industry, and it's a growth industry. Whereas building bridges, so-so. So we made that shift. 2, more and more we're making a shift where we're saying we need technologists who understand the liberal arts. So NYU premises their education on not just technical, but liberal arts, so that you have these human factors, you have this ability to be empathetic, so that you can, again, compete against the robot. The robot we're going to imagine is less empathetic, less creative, more mechanical. So the human has to play the other role. That's an enormous education challenge, and I think it will tax the creativity of any number of us to invent the educational system that can deliver that. And on the heels of that, it's the economic system that says if machines produce most of the wealth, where do people get their income from? Where's their money come from? Because the system doesn't work unless people have money to buy goods. Why have machines produce goods if no one can buy them? A labor leader went into a Ford factory in 1950, and the head of Ford said, "Look at these robots making cars. Isn't this great, efficient?" And the labor leader said, "How many of these robots buy cars?" That's the problem we face in the future, is how do we have people have the jobs and income to buy the goods these machines will produce? So that's why we push our students to step way into the future. I do think that we're in a transition period. This is a time of lack of clarity. How strong will this be? How soon will cars be all autonomous? How soon will drones deliver the goods? We don't know. So right now, it's a tough spot. I need the old skills because they're still in demand, and I'm soon going to need the new skills because, wow, my truck driving job is over. 20 years from now, this actually may be easier to answer. It'll be clear which way robots are going. It'll be clear which way humans are going. And then we'll just pursue that goal. In between, we've got some work to do.
I think we are far from autonomous vehicles in India if you've just seen the traffic on our roads. But there are enough real problems, as you mentioned. Sudhava, can you talk a little bit about how prepared is India, even if not for drones and autonomous vehicles, but we still have a long way to go. How prepared, is the government doing anything? Are educational institutions doing anything? Like, what's going on in terms of addressing the situation?
Yeah, taking off from where I had left, see, the data is all in, and I'm basically concentrating on the women and the girl-child part because I work on diversity and inclusion, and I feel that this is one important thing which all of us need to address. So that data is all in, that if there is gender parity at work, India gets a jump of 18% in GDP, which means $770 billion worth of GDP. And then we talk of AI and machine learning, which basically means that when the machines take over, what are human beings left with? So we are left with the soft skills. So are we doing enough in this area to develop the soft skills in the girls? We are talking of the demographic dividend in 2025, which means barely 5-6 years from hence, from today, which means any government, the new government which comes in, whether it's this government or or some other party, has to address itself onto this issue. It needs to step back a little and see what has been done so far. How far are we prepared for the future? And then I find that there is no harm in learning from the good practices which are being done around the world, and even in some states in India like West Bengal, they have the Kanya Shri scheme, which is a brilliant scheme to retain girls in school. We have to go back to the basics because the kind of culture we have, it doesn't promote girl students to study. There are issues of infrastructure, the kind of teachers that we have, the kind of setup we have. Girls drop off because of a small reason like lack of toilets. So these are the things which we need to look into. And when we talk about whether the government and the other sectors are doing enough or not, I feel there are schemes in place. There are very good schemes in place. You have the Ujjwala scheme, you have so many schemes. There's no end to it. But then what is it that is lacking? Why are these schemes not coming into effect? You have in the corporate sector, you have the CSR. But where is that CSR going, and what is it generating at the end of the day so far as skills are concerned? We are all agreed on this issue that skills are going to dominate the world economy in the days to come. So now the thing is, so far as the government is concerned, well, it has the schemes, but I feel the government has its own limitations, and we look too much and we depend too much on the government to get everything done, to get everything executed. There are good schemes, but when it is being implemented, there is a lot of gap. So that gap needs to be addressed. A gap analysis needs to be done, a genuine one. And we need people who are committed enough to the cause that they are working for, who are willing to walk the extra mile, whose integrity is beyond doubt. Otherwise, these schemes will not translate onto the ground, as it is unfortunately happening at the moment. And then, again, the question arises. So what happens is, the government does its bit, the corporates do their bit, because they have a big role in skilling the people who are already into the system, skilling them further for the job requirements. Are they doing that? And then overall, we have the civil society, each one of us. First, we have to ask ourselves, what have we done? What can we do where we are standing? Like she spoke of mentorship. Now, we have a huge number of civil servants retiring every year. They have their own core competencies. Why can we not generate a system where the experience of age, the experience of working is brought together with the energy of youth? See, we are losing out on so many things, and no nation is going to progress unless we pay enough attention, the relevant kind of attention, and at the relevant time to the human capital. Money is fine, investments are okay, but if the human capital is not measuring up to what is required of it, where do we go from here? And this is actually what is happening. We are not working together. We are all working in silos. The government works in silos, the private sector works in silos. So we need to bring all these energy together and then generate that synergy and the critical mass, which becomes, the kind of escape velocity which will push us out of the trap, the low-level equilibrium trap which we have entered so far as education and skill is concerned. So I think there's a need for all of us to work together, and the things are in place. Only thing is, we need to see that they're implemented well. We have the National Skill Mission going. We have the Atal Tinkering Labs, which is a very brilliant concept, because that is what is going to be the genesis of innovations, innovativeness. We have such things going on. But then when you go to the ground, you find that there is a lot of things missing. Now, we have to address this gap. We need to find out what is it that is holding us back. And we have to put the right people at the right places.
Just one question on that, Jerry. You must be getting a lot of students from developing economies across the board, including India. When they come into you, what do you see in terms of the gap, and do you have any suggestions on how to fix it?
Actually, I want to carry on the conversation that Sutapa started. I have a question for you. The level of income in South Korea is what? About, I think, $37,000. The level of income in Malaysia is $20,000 per person, US. How many of you believe that India, all 1.4 billion, could have an income of $20,000 US a year? Can you imagine that economy?
Not me.
Yes, very difficult to imagine, and that, I think, is one of the fundamental visionary issues that India faces, because these other countries have done that. And this would lead to all kinds of opportunity and all kinds of young people doing things that mattered if we could imagine giving everyone the ability to earn $20,000 or $37,000 a year. In other places, China's role has been remarkably strong in this regard. And that's a big gap of vision that I would test you to use. And now, not everyone needs to solve that, but the economists, the political leadership, the people who understand human nature, to understand what kind of change will it take to get that big a change in, let's say, the next 20 years. Because that's when this 500 million set of young people are going to demand that they get a part of the action that Malaysia, China, Japan, South Korea have all gotten.
Ariadne, because of the work you've done in the Middle East, what are some of the things that can be done from your experience to address these gaps?
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of takes me back to what I was saying before, which is I think that the key is, I mean, it's very difficult to train for jobs that don't exist. So the key is about this concept of future proofing, I think. And so exposing young people, kind of future job seekers from very early on in their studies to help them shape their career trajectory and be able to engage with and interact with individuals that are working in industries that are changing rapidly so that they have kind of a certain set of skills and adaptability.
How do you set up that, how does a country like India set up that sort of network? I mean, institutions like an IIT or an IIM, they have their own alumni networks. Some of the better companies have their own alumni networks. But how do you take it to the next level to people who are not in an IIT,
Right.
people who are in a local engineering college or whatever it is?
Right. Right, and that's exactly what we're trying to do with Localize. So we've built a platform that essentially enables students that are coming out of universities that may be getting, say, the fundamentals of software engineering, but are not trained in the kinds of things that make them attractive to employers. So like cloud and agile and new technologies. And giving them access to mentors and top professionals and global experts with whom they share cultural context. So, for example, a person from India who's working in AI in Silicon Valley, who's talking to a group of engineers, young engineers in Coimbatore. We have another example is I mean, there are many, but a Jordanian CEO of a smart grid company in Singapore who's sharing his expertise with, groups of students in Amman that don't have access to this. And this, the power of mentorship is, I think, I gave some statistics around it, but we've done a lot of research around this. And people state very clearly how, somebody who kind of, one mentor that we work with from Jordan had someone come in from Microsoft from his same community who only spent 1 hour with his class when he was in undergrad, and he said it was this aha moment that changed my life to see that someone from my same community can go on and work at Microsoft. So I think technology is enabling us to do the kinds of things at scale that maybe were previously one-on-one that, were a little bit less, we're able to leverage that impact even better. But I just one last statistic that we work with, which I think is similar in India, but you were asking me about our experience in the Middle East. So in Egypt, for instance, statistically speaking, the more educated you are, so the more degrees you have, the less likely you are to have a job, right? So there's a massive skills mismatch that's happening, which is what what everybody here has been saying, and so we need to figure out ways to leverage technology to address that and to update our curricula.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, on the stage and off the stage as well. Megha, thank you so much for moderating this.